Good evening and welcome. I'm Robert Wise, President of the Academy. Thank you. The sequence we just saw was from the third film of the Frankenstein series, Son of Frankenstein, released by Universal Pictures in 1938. In it, Boris Karloff again played the monstrous creation of Baron Frankenstein, the role that had brought him stardom 7 years earlier, and which had served as the foundation for the classic Universal horror cycles of the 30s. Although he declined to play the role again for the studio subsequent to Son of Frankenstein, in the minds of successive generations of filmgoers, Karloff and the monster have continued to be irrevocably linked. Tonight, however, we are here to do something more than acknowledge the fortuitous casting of a talented actor and a singular motion picture characterization. We are here to honor a tireless professional who applied his considerable skills, sensitivity, innate generosity, and humor to a remarkable number of varied roles, both on screen and off. For on film, on stage, on television, and in his private life, Boris Karloff showed us something about ourselves and this thing we call the human condition. In 1945, I had the privilege of directing Boris in a picture based on a Robert Louis Stevenson short story called The Body Snatcher. Thank you. It was my third effort as a director. It was Boris's 68th film since the introduction of sound, and the 124th film of his career at that date. But more about that later. In the meantime, let me turn over the helm to the capable hands of our program moderator for this evening. He is the acclaimed director of stage, film, and television, a former governor of the Academy, current chairman of the UCLA Department of Theater, Film, and Television, and the winner of a Tony and more Emmys than he or anybody else can carry. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. George Schaefer. George?
Thank you, Bob. I was delighted when I was asked to MC the Boris Karloff evening, because Boris was a close personal friend, meant a great deal to my life and to my career. And it gives me a wonderful chance I'd like to take hours and talk about Boris. Unfortunately, we are on a schedule tonight. Jeff Edwards, who has put this fabulous evening together, has selected 17 separate film clips, in addition to our visits with some of Boris's co-stars and workers behind the camera. And I've been given a schedule that runs by seconds. I'm allowed 3 minutes to tell you about a lifetime with Boris, so I'll talk very quickly. It was in '44 that I first met him. We were in the Army doing soldier shows out in the Pacific in Morris Evans' unit. And our favorite kind of shows were when a star would come out and join the soldiers in a legitimate play. And Boris volunteered and came out to join an all-soldier cast in Arsenic and Old Lace. I was in the unit. I directed the play. And as we were doing most anything to win the war at that time, I also played Teddy Roosevelt. We were all petrified at the thought of the star of the Broadway original, this fabulous movie star, arriving in the company that was already rehearsed and waiting for him. And of course, in came the sweetest, dearest, most cultivated, wonderful man that one would ever meet. He won everyone over in his relationships to the soldiers. We played the production. We flew it in airplanes to all the outer islands. He stayed with us for 4 or 5 months, and Boris and I were friends ever since. I never did get to direct Boris in a film, which I regret. I did 2 plays with him, one on Broadway and that production of Arsenic, and I did 2 big television specials that I directed with Boris, but never got to work with him in film, because film was Boris's love. We'd argue. We had a good fiery relationship, and I had come rather snottily from Yale Drama School, and it was all theater and theater acting, and Boris was convinced that film acting was more demanding and, in its own way, more difficult and special than stage acting. I couldn't hear, but we fought like tigers. And I must say, in the years since, when I've been doing more and more films, I've come to realize what Boris was talking about. The amount of concentration and the talent to come out performance, take after take, with that kind of performance is extraordinary, and I rather think Boris was right. Tonight, we're going to take time to talk about Boris the performer and to see Boris the performer. It's funny, at UCLA, I'm very angry with the students. They don't seem to know anything about the past. But you go up to them and you mention Robert Donat or Alfred Lunt or even Paul Muni may give you that sort of dumb look. But you mention Boris Karloff, and immediately they are delighted. They seem to know exactly what you're talking about. Now, what was there about this extraordinary man that came through in a somewhat limited assortment of roles? Seemed like an unlikely man to be the great star he was. He had to overcome a stammer in his youth. He always had a slight lisp, which he used beautifully to perfection. He had back troubles. He was in a lot of pain in his later years. He was slightly bow-legged. Everything about him he used. He had that handsome, craggy face, but was nobody's idea of a matinee idol. And yet, he has become this tremendous star that we're honoring this evening on pretty much the 100th anniversary of his birth. Tonight, on the screen, I think we'll hear some of the answers, and I know we'll hear them from the other guests. I'm sure my 3 minutes are more than up, and I have to get right on with my schedule. It says here that Boris Karloff had a remarkably prolific film career, with more than 140 features to his credit over a 53-year period that began in 1916. Few people are aware that Boris had 56 features to his credit before he appeared in a sound film. This might provide at least partial explanation of his singular expressiveness as an actor in several classics, essentially nonverbal roles that came his way with the talkies. Most of his silent era roles were supporting ones as rascals and villains. As he slowly moved his way up and out of the ranks of extra and bit players, his tall, lean, angular looks, coupled with his years of experience playing heavies in theatrical road company tours of the popular melodramas of the day, conspired to keep him cast in a darker mode. We're privileged this evening to be able to see excerpts from two of the silent-era Karloff films. Very hard to find these. One is called The Nickel Hopper, with the delicious Mabel Normand, and the other one, which will follow it immediately, is The Bells, with none other than Lionel Barrymore as Boris's co-star. Roll the film. Good. It's now my privilege to introduce the first of our panels. These are three fellow performers with Boris. I guess if they would just step up as I introduce them and sit here, then we'll have a certain allotment of time to chat. First, I'd like to introduce to you a very glorious actress who made so many films. Her debut was in 1929. And will be remembered, among others, for that wonderful performance as Molly Malloy in the film of The Front Page. Very well remembered indeed as the lovely young lady who got a grapefruit in the face from Jimmy Cagney in The Public Enemy. She starred with Boris in Frankenstein, and you saw her a little bit ago, and in Night World in 1932. Mae Clarke. Mae Clarke, would you step up, please? I would next like to introduce the actress who you just saw in Bedlam, playing beautifully that role. She came from the London stage originally and did films in London. In fact, the first film with Boris was done in London, then in Hollywood. Oh, so many films. The Passing of the Third Floor, back to the recent Sound of Music and Star. Great performance in How Green Was My Valley, a highlight of her career. And just today, I learned this evening, she received an award as the Outstanding Supporting Actress in the fourth year of the Soap Opera Digest Awards, believe it or not. Still working and still lovely, Miss Anna Lee. And the third member of our acting trio is a gentleman known to you all. I first saw him as Prince Albert opposite Helen Hayes in Victoria, Regina, many a moon ago. and he's been acting brilliantly in a series of films and stage plays. Right up to the present day, we see him again as a prince, the beautiful performance as the Russian prince in The Whales of August, playing this very moment. He appeared with Boris 3 times in The Tower of London in '39, The Raven, and The Comedy of Terrors in 1963. He is, of course, the talented Coral Brown's most talented husband, Vincent Price. Now, I think the thing we'd love to hear from you individually and collectively would be any reminiscences, stories, memories of life with Boris. Mae, why don't you start us off?
Life with Boris was hard to come by, because he got up at, anyway, he had 6 hours ahead of all of us in that makeup room. And then long before that, he was in the makeup room creating it. But at that time, we did all have a little piece of Boris, because everyone became a part of the whole. And under the head, wonderful James Whale, our director, Arthur Edison, our Oscar-winning cameraman, and all the crew. If I started to name them, we'd be here another 200 years. But they know of this, I'm sure, and we know of it. Most of you do too, and because it's in print. And that means the whole cast, the whole crew, every one of them all named, and not here. I am the only one left of Frankenstein, and I'd like to speak for them in saying, hello everyone, happy, happy birthday, Boris. And before I go another step further, that instantly means, and happy memories, dear Evie Karloff and his family.
Right. Anna, could you tell us some of your adventures with our dear Boris?
Well, you see, the first picture I made with Boris was a long, long time ago in the 30s, and we did a picture called The Man Who Changed His Mind. I think it was now called The Man Who Lived Again in America. Anyway, there was Boris and myself and John Loder and 2 chimpanzees. I remember the chimpanzees very well because they had the dressing room next to me. But Boris, I always remember, even in those days, as a very dear, gentle, loving man. And the one thing we had in common was poetry, because Boris loved poetry, and so did I. And I remember we used to have a sort of jam session on poetry. I would say a line, I would say, between the dark and the daylight, and he'd say, the night is beginning to lower, and I could never find a poem that he didn't know. I mean, I even tried, they told me, Heraclitus, they told me you were dead. And right away he would say, they brought me bitter news to hear and bitter tears to shed. And I never could find a poem that he didn't know. Then, of course, years and years later, when I was in America, we made Bedlam, in which, of course, it was not a horror picture, and he never felt it was a horror picture because he played the Apothecary General, and it was beautifully produced by Val Luton on the one of the drawings of Hogarth, William Hogarth, and all through it, I thought Boris gave a brilliant performance because he could be very sadistic at one moment, and then you almost felt tears in your eyes watching him at the end when he was pleading for his life, and he said how, you know, he'd felt that the whole world was looking at his ugliness, and he was afraid. He was a wonderful man, and I think he had great talent and great scope of talent.
He certainly did. That knowledge of poetry and details, he was so wonderful on the radio shows of Information Please. I don't know whether many of you remember those, but he would be pitted against the leading brains and memories of America, and he'd always come out on top.
Always.
Brilliant man. Vincent, the floor is yours.
Well, My memories of Boris are long. I worked with him right from the beginning of my career, right through both of our careers. And the first picture I did with him was called The Tower of London, and I had only done about 2 movies. And I was terribly impressed to be working with 2 of my favorite actors, Boris Karloff and Basil Rathbone. And I had what we call today a cameo part. That means a small role with very little money. And I played the Duke of Clarence, and Basil played Richard III, and Boris, of course, played the executioner. And we had a scene where we had to drink for the Kingdom of England. It was a drinking bout. And Roland Lee, who directed the picture, didn't like the dialogue, and neither did we, because the more we drank, the less we could remember of it. And it was only Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola's stimulating too. So finally Roland just said, well, to hell with the dialogue, why don't you just ad-lib it? Well, over in one corner was a huge vat of Malmsey, of wine, in which I was to be thrown. And Boris and Basil, knowing I was new to the business, thought it was great fun to throw everything they could into that vat of wine. Old Coca-Cola bottles, cigarette butts, anything they could find to dirty it up, because they knew that at the end of the scene I had to get into it. And so we played our scene and drank for the Kingdom of England, and Basil won, and I passed out, and Boris and Basil picked me up and threw me into the vat of wine. Whereupon they jumped on top of it, and the lid stuck. And I'm 6 foot under in all of this slop that they'd been throwing in there for you. Well, after they finally got me out, and they were very sweet to me, and they said, you played that scene very well for a newcomer, they presented me with a case of Coca-Cola. Now, really, I think the thing that I remember most about Boris, I loved him very much. Christopher Lee called me yesterday, and he was furious that he couldn't be here, and he sent his love to all of you. Because he felt the same way that I did about Boris, an enormous closeness as a friend, as a co-worker. We did really quite a few pictures together. But this marvelous sort of warmth that he had as a human being. He was a very funny man. And all of this was so against the image of Boris that we all have. We used to go out to dinner in London. It was wonderful fun because the 2 of us would walk in. We could clear the biggest restaurant. We never had to make reservations because as we walked in, people walked out. We had our choice of any table. But I think probably the thing I remember most about him is the fact that I got on an airplane last year. Boris has been gone some 20 years. I've been around and almost gone quite that long, too. But I got on a plane last year to go somewhere, and everybody came up and said, oh, Mr. Price, may we have your autograph? And I was very flattered that they remembered. Then finally one man came in, and he just looked at me and said, Mr. Karloff, I have always wanted your autograph. So I gave him Boris Karloff's autograph. So what a dear man he was.
Oh, he certainly was. Maybe the story that I've read that you've said, which I'd love to hear about, which was a little bit of trickery that was used to get you to scream in the Frankenstein. I think everybody would love to hear that, if you could remember that story.
I'll tell it again. I've told it many times through the years, but I've never told it on the media. I had to dig in and tell my story, so it isn't really virginal tonight, but here it is. And that the story is about the scene you saw with the wedding, the gown, and I'm there locked in. Wasn't that nice of Colin Clive to lock me in? He forgot to check the windows. That was great. But anyway, Boris found the window and got in, and you saw what you saw. I didn't see it yet. You anticipated it for me and suffered for me, and I thank you for that. And really, I was in need of sympathy. So before the scene was ready, I went to James Whale and I said, honestly, you know, I know it's Boris, and I know it's pretend, and I know I'm getting paid to do it, and I better, but how can I be helped? I'm really going to faint. I'm going to go dead. He said, no, listen, you go on over and talk to Boris. He's always got something to tell. So I went over and said, Boris, here it is, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I really am going to turn around and see you, and I will be, you know, I'm trying to play my part, and I'll be throwing myself into it, and I'm afraid I'll be so far in, I'm going to be out on the floor. He said, no, come on. He said, now you see, this is my upstage, oh, pardon me, wrong media, up camera. See, I know the difference. I remember up camera hand won't be seen because of my body, but when you turn around, you look right to it, and my little finger will be going like that, and it'll be so ridiculous you couldn't honestly feel badly at all. And that's what we did. Isn't that cute?
I love it.
That great big Hulk.
No, that's typical. Anything else to impart? Any other little story? Anything you'd like to add at this point?
I always remember he was very agitated when he was in England to find out that we didn't have a union. And, you know, we did our own stunt work, and we worked on Sundays, we worked on Saturdays, and he said, you must get a union, because we got a wonderful one in Hollywood. Well, we finally did get the union, but I always remember he was very distressed about this, and he talked about it a great deal.
Well, if we were really discussing Boris the Total Man tonight, we'd never get to any of his films, but he was devoted to the Screen Actors Guild.
I know,
he's one of the founders.
He
was
was
one
one
of
of
the
the
charter
founders. He
members,
spent
yeah.
time and unlimited time and energy in making the SAG what it is today.
Yeah.
He, I know, received one of their honorary lifetime memberships, and they revered
Yeah.
him.
I think one of the extraordinary things about Boris was his gratitude for Frankenstein. You know, it was something that plagued him for all his life, as a good part always plagues every actor. But he was so grateful for it because it gave him enormous fame, probably the most lasting fame in Hollywood, I would think.
Yes.
It's Boris Karloff.
It's wonderful to have a sense of humor about it. When we wanted and finally succeeded in having him play the lead in J.P. Priestley's play, The Linden Tree, in New York. Morris Evans was producing it, and I was directing it. And we wanted Boris very much for the part of the professor, but J.B. Priestley couldn't, very unhappy about the thought of it. And I flew to London and spent time with him. And the thing that finally broke it was a cable from Boris to Miss Priestley saying, I promise not to eat the baby.
I have only one story to tell about him, that I did Peter Pan as a musical, and Boris sent me a wire the opening night of Peter Pan. Be sure and wear knee pads in the doghouse. If any of you have seen Peter Pan, you know that he's Daddy Darling, too.
Oh, Mr. Schaefer, may I say it's a pleasure to be on your panel?
Well, thank all three of you for being here. It's just been wonderful. Also,
May I say that this is a
please.
grand reunion here, too, along with Boris's birthday, with Miss Lee. She and I were two ladies in Dick Wayne's show, The Flying Tigers.
Oh.
We have great memories there.
Great
And as
memories.
for the child over here,
Thank you.
Baby.
Thanks, kid.
we opened live television on Hallmark.
We certainly
in the
did.
Heiress. That's when they
That's
buried
true.
me.
Vincent, back in the 60s, that you and Boris entered into a very productive association with Roger Corman, the producer-director, and in this collaboration gave you both the opportunity to poke some fun at this horror genre, and there were two very memorable efforts, The Comedy of Terrors and The Raven, and we're going to see an excerpt now from The Raven. Anything you'd like to say before we dive into it?
You know, I think The Comedy of Terrors had the funniest premise I've ever known in my life. It was about a family of out-of-work undertakers.
What casting? Thank you, all three.
Thank you.
Get safely down before we start the screening. Boris was very active in theater and later very active in the golden age of television, in the early live shows. In fact, one of the very first live television shows I ever saw was starring Boris, directed by Alex Siegel, and Evie and Boris took me to watch him at work, a whole new medium to me at the time. He then scored many personal triumphs in the theater, in Arsenic and Old Lace, of course, Peter Pan with Jean Arthur. On Broadway and elsewhere, he's played a lot. He was very memorable on Broadway as Cauchon opposite Julie Harris in The Lark, which was one of the shows I had the pleasure of directing for the Hallmark Hall of Fame with Boris. And of course, in the 60s, Boris served as the host and the frequent star of, I think, some 66 episodes of the Thriller television series. Next, we're going to have a behind-the-scenes kind of discussion with three other guests who I would like to introduce to you again, if they'll step forward, and then we can all chat together. First of all, the man who doesn't need introduction because he introduced me, the glorious director of West Side Story, Sand Pebbles, Sound of Music, etc., the president of our academy, former president of the Directors Guild, and director of The Body Snatcher, Bob Wise. Robert, please. To join the directors, so we won't be utterly in majority and outnumbering all, we have with us Richard Matheson tonight, a very well-known, very famous screenwriter who wrote the original screenplay for The Fly, The Legend of Hill House, Trilogy of Terror, many of the greatest of the Twilight Zone episodes, a real master of writing for the horror thriller genre. He wrote both The Raven and The Comedy of Terrors screenplays. Richard Matheson, would you join us, Richard? And the third member of our trio of guests is we used to always say young director, but I must say he's getting close to not quite being that young anymore. The very talented young man who made the transition from being a film critic and a film historian to being a successful and a very brilliant director, which is a very rare transition indeed. His film, The Last Picture Show, We'll Never Forget, What's Up, Doc, Paper Moon, etc., and was very instrumental in Boris's career at the end and in Peter's at the beginning, which I'm sure he'll tell us about when he directed Targets in '68. Peter Bogdanovich. Peter, please. Well, gentlemen, why don't we use the same routine and go right down the line and reminisce, say anything you'd care to say about your experiences with our...
Oh, my goodness. Well, it was my first picture. It was years ago now, 20 years ago, and Boris owed Roger Corman 2 days' work. And Roger, is known to use every moment. And so I had worked with Roger on a picture, and he wanted to give me the opportunity to make my own picture. So he said, Boris Karloff owes me 2 days' work. And I made a picture with him called The Terror, which actually was made on the same set as The Raven. It's just exactly the same set. And with Jack also. And Roger had made this film and a couple of years before, and he said, look, I want you to take 20 minutes of Karloff footage out of The Terror and shoot another 20 minutes with Boris in 2 days. You can shoot 20 minutes in 2 days. I've shot whole pictures in 2 days. And he says, and then you'll have 40 minutes of Karloff. Then I want you to go out with some other actors for 10 days and shoot some other stuff, and then for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have a new 80-minute Karloff picture. He said, will you do it? And I said, sure. So I didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but at some point along the way, I had an idea that maybe it'd be interesting if Boris played himself, so to speak, an aging movie star who'd been famous for playing horror characters and who decided he wanted to quit playing in movies because the horror on the streets, the kind of random violence that was that was with us in the 60s and hasn't gone away yet, was more terrifying than the kind of Victorian monster that he'd been playing. So anyway, that was the idea, and we wrote a script, and eventually it got to Boris, and he liked it, and there was no way we could shoot his stuff in 2 days. As it turned out, we needed 5, and so Boris gave us the extra 3, and that's how Target started.
It's a wonderful picture. We're going to see bits of it shortly. I'd like to hear more about those families of undertakers.
I'd like to comment on this the staircase scene that Mr. Karloff went down. I just found out tonight that I never knew what was really what the physical fiction was that he had, but I guess Mr. Price just told me tonight that he had a severe arthritis in both his legs, and that staircase that was designed by Danny Haller was a very precipitous staircase indeed. There were no railings to hold on to. They were very narrow, and I was there on the set when he came down them, and he had to come down the whole thing, and he never winced. And you noticed that they cut between them, starting down and reaching the bottom, but it was a very difficult thing for him to do, but he did it without any complaint whatever. And I was very pleased that the 2 pictures that he was in that I wrote were both comedies, because he had a remarkably droll sense of humor. And as we've seen tonight, he didn't get too much of a chance to use it in his pictures, but he was very good in these pictures. Now, the comedy of terrors you were talking about, he and Basil Rathbone had to switch parts, because by the time they got to that picture, his condition was so bad that he literally could not walk around with any success at all. And so he gave the part that he was to play to Basil Rathbone, who, curiously enough, was older than him, but was incredibly lithe and physical still at his age. I had a wonderful 2 days, as a side note, talking to Basil Rathbone as he told me about The Duel and Robin Hood, which was always one of my favorite movies. And one of the regrets of my writing life is that I had written a 3rd picture for American International called Sweethearts and Horrors, in which Mr. Price, Mr. Karloff, Mr. Laurie, Tallulah Bankhead, and let's see now who else, and Basil Rathbone were supposed to play the Sweetheart family, who were all show business people and who were coming home to the reading of the will of their father, who was a man who made magic gags and devices, and it could have been a delightful picture, but before they could shoot it, 3 of them had died. So they never made that.
That is a major loss. No, Boris's sense of fun and comedy was such an unexpected one, I guess. I don't know why it should have been, but he would love every Sunday night in the years in the I guess the late 40s now. We'd sit in his backyard when he and Evie were living here in Rexford with martinis and Jack Benny and be regaled. I mean, he absolutely adored Jack Benny. And when in London, we'd go to see the Crazy Gang at the theater over there with Victoria, and that was kind of broad slapstick farce comedy. He just simply adored. Never happier, unless maybe he was trying to teach an American how to play cricket, which he never succeeded in. Bob, tell us some of your adventures on Body Snatchers.
I'll never forget our first meeting. The way so many of these things start, Val Lewton had been doing a kind of series of psychological horror films that were very well received at RKO, Cat People and I Walk with a Zombie, things like that. And the front office decided they'd like to have a Karloff picture. And initially, Val was not quite taken with that idea because it was a different kind of sort of genre that he was doing. But he agreed to do it, and Val came up and trying to answer this and not come in the same vein that Boris had been doing in that period, with the idea of doing the Robert Louis Stevenson's story of the Body Snatcher. And I never forget, we went up to meet Boris for the first time. Neither Val and I had ever met him and didn't quite know what to expect. We went to the old Myron Selznick agency up on Wilshire. If any old-timers here might remember, that was a bungalow up there in Wilshire. And Val and I were waiting in the office, and as I say, we hadn't met him, we didn't know what to expect. And in walked this lovely, charming, cultivated man with soft-spoken voice, just a lovely, lovely quality. And I never forgot speaking of his troubles, his ailment, he was having a very severe problem with his back when we were doing the picture. But like your experience with him, he had to carry these bodies of the heavy dummies and whatnot, and never a complaint. He was very keen, particularly keen, I think, about doing the Body Snatcher, because it was a very good role for him, and not the monster he had been playing in so many things, and had a chance to have some really good dual scenes with Henry Daniell, who was one of the top English character actors here in town. And Boris just really relished those and just gave his all the way through those scenes. About working with Lugosi, that was once again a front office afterthought. He was not in the original story at all. And the front office said, "Hey, wouldn't it be great to have Boris and Lugosi in a film again?" So Luton and I talked about it, and Val came up with the idea of adding in this Porter scene that played in the film. And Lugosi was not well at all during the filming. He was really not in very good shape, and Boris couldn't have been nicer, more gentle, and more helpful to him in the scene that you saw. That was about the only scene they had together. And in consequence, he was so easy with him, and careful, and helped him and worked with him in the sequence very much. So it was a marvelous experience working with him. He was just thoroughly professional and dedicated, and yet such an antithesis of what he appeared on the screen in so many ways.
Oh, it's true. There's a scene we're going to see. In fact, I believe we're going to have two scenes from Targets before we retire tonight. But the first one, I gather, needs a bit of an introduction. Peter, are you prepared to prepare us for it?
What is the first one? I don't know which one we're showing first.
Well, I don't know. It was the one that I said. I got a little note that said Peter is going to introduce the first scene from Targets. That's all I know.
Doug Edwards, which one is it?
Well, I think it might be the one that I was going to tell a story about, but there was a scene in the picture where there was no scene in the picture like this until we had an idea. We thought, geez, we got Boris Karloff, and he's the most wonderful storyteller. And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice if he told a story in the picture? So we came up with a reason why he would tell it, and there was a scene in the hotel, and there had been a kind of a legend about death catching up with a merchant in Samara. And Somerset Maugham had written it as a kind of an introduction to a play. And we had to get the rights from the Maugham estates to use this kind of quote from about an appointment in Samara. And as it turned out, it was about a page and a half of stuff that Boris had to say without a cut, as we decided to do it without a cut. As a matter of fact, it was funny because there were about 5 actors sitting around in the scene. And I said to Boris, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. We'd been working since 9, and Evie Karloff was there. She was helping put some drapes up in the set. It was wonderful way to start for me, because here was this legend and his wonderful wife helping us do this at 1 o'clock in the morning in some little studio in Santa Monica. And I said to Boris, I don't know exactly how to do this shot, Boris, but I thought we'd do it without a cut. And I thought maybe I'd begin with you and then pan around and come back to you. He says, oh. So maybe we won't pan around. Maybe we just... I said, maybe we'll just start back here and just move in on you. He said, oh, that's good. So I said, now do you need any help with the words? Because it's a lot of words. You want them on a, he said, I don't need an idiot board, no. So and it was a complicated shot because there was a table in the way and the camera had to move in and we had to sneak the table out while Boris was talking. Anyway, we started the take, and before we started, I said to him, look, when the story's over, at the very end, the camera will be in a close-up on you. And, the story's about death catching up with you no matter what you do. So at the very end, after you finish, I'm going to hold on and just kind of think about, the character's thinking about dying. So just give me something at the end, will you? So the camera moved in, and we did it, and he did this wonderful little thing at the end of it. And then I just said, cut, and the whole crew just started to applaud, just boom, like that. And he got tears in his eyes, and I know Evie did, and there wasn't anybody who didn't. And was one of those incredible moments that we'll always remember. And he did it great. And he was such a professional and a man who really loved what he was doing. It was just a great experience to have him, such a great man, on my first picture.
Good. Well, I gather we're going to see that scene right now, and it's asked if we'll sit down front, because otherwise we'll make big heads up on the screen. Then we can come back afterwards, but those chairs are reserved for us. I guess we should put on the house lights. These are a few of our special guests here tonight that you really should meet. If they just sort of stand up, though, so we can all see them, if the spotlight can pick them out. First, Boris's co-star in the premature burial episode of the Thriller television series in '61, Patricia Medina. Patricia, where are you? There we are, over there. With Miss Medina, who is in real life his wife, is one of our great actors who is with us here tonight, a very good friend of the Karloffs, Joseph Cotten. Would you stand up, please? Another of Boris's co-stars is with us tonight. She starred with him in The Ape in 1940 and is the wife of our beloved Academy member, one of our co-chairmen of the Foreign Film Committee, Rudy Fair. It's Maris Rickson. Maris, where are you? There we are. And Boris's co-star in The Raven in '63, the one we've seen part of, is here tonight, I believe, Hazel Court. Hazel? There we are. And we have with us tonight two members of Boris's family, his dearly beloved daughter, Sarah. Sarah Cotten, would you stand up, Sarah? There we are. And lastly, our own precious love, the woman who made Boris's last years so gloriously happy, one of the gems of this world, Evie Karloff. Evie, my darling. Before our final clip, on behalf of the Academy, I want to thank all of our special guests this evening and you, our audience, for your attention and enthusiasm. Boris always knew that were it not for his legion fans, he would not have been able to do what he loved doing, which of course was acting. And I suspect somehow he's perhaps aware of all of us gathered here in his honor tonight. In his typical modesty, he's probably embarrassed, but I hope wherever he may be, extremely pleased. Our final look will be another scene from Targets, the one in which the Karloff character with the slightly changed name reflects on his character's career in the movies, a career very much like his own. That will be our last film clip. Thank you all, and after that, good night.